An entitled Karen calls the police on me after I parked my car in a handicap spot that she demanded she deserved more than me. But after the police show up and investigate the situation, they find out that not only is her license and her plates completely suspended, but this Karen is also using a handicap sticker illegally. And I've honestly never been happier to watch somebody's car get towed away in my life. Here's what happened. Okay, so I'm backed into a handicap spot outside of a big box store. I just barely put the car in park and had yet to put my tag in the window when another car pulled into the hatch mark area next to me. That's when the entitled Karen of this story gets out of the car and starts cussing me out because now she needs to park illegally because of people like me who park in handicapped spots without a tag. I let her go on for a good 30 seconds while I finished taking my hearing aids out as they were starting to hurt my ears, and I then opened my door and I looked directly at her while I took the tag from the door and I hung it on the mirror. And the look of shock on this entitled Karen's face was absolutely priceless, and I only wish I could have taken a picture of it. She then walks away, ranting and raving about how much of a jerk I was for letting her go on like that, and then telling me that it's all my fault. I then just go into the store, but she is still screaming and hollering at me. Now, about what, you might be asking? Honestly, I'm just glad I don't know. I go on about my shopping, I check out, and then I head back out to the car. As I'm approaching, I see 2 police cars parked in front of my car with 2 officers chatting. Thinking nothing of it, I put my bags in the trunk and close it. One of the officers then asks if this is my car, and I say to him, "Yeah, is there a problem?" Well, they then explained they received a call from an irate shopper who stated the person driving this car was harassing her. And at this point, I started laughing so hard that I couldn't breathe, with the officers staring at me incredibly confused. I then had the pleasure of telling them my story. And you know what? They laughed as well. And they said that my story lines up better with what they saw on the store's cameras, as well as what the associate at the door said. They then ran my information, verified that my handicap tag was valid, and said I was good to go. Now, the officer of the police car that was in front of me never moved their car, so I couldn't leave, but I sure didn't mind. I wanted to see what happened. I then watched as a lady turned white as a ghost when she came out of the doors to see her car being strapped down on the back of a tow truck, but her white then went to red as she was handed a number of citations. As it turned out, her car had suspended plates, her license was suspended, and the handicap tag displayed had been void for being used illegally. And as a side note, for those of you who may not know, you can only park in the designated spot when the person who was issued the tag is in the vehicle, and the person doesn't need to be the driver, meaning that if you're found in violation of this, the tag may be suspended or revoked. This entitled Karen then stood around screaming at anyone who had the misfortune of being in her vicinity, but I thankfully got away from that, and I drove out of the parking lot with a giant grin on my face. Wow, what is wrong with that lady? Like, seriously. She not only decided to pick a fight with someone parking in a handicap spot, but also literally put a target on her back for the police to be like, wait a second, you're the one in the wrong. Her license is suspended, the plates are suspended, the tag is being used illegally. Like, this Karen hit all the marks of being a total moron while also literally sabotaging her life. But you know what? I love the way the original poster handled this because they were calm and collected throughout this entire ordeal, which is a lot better than how I would have handled it, trust me, because this Karen was completely out of line, and it is so satisfying seeing that karma absolutely took her down. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for requesting an explanation from my sister-in-law after she literally spent $1,000 of my money without my consent? Because right now I'm still incredibly angry, and at this point I don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So this past summer, I underwent a lengthy surgical procedure that required several weeks in the hospital out of town and several months of follow-up. I needed to have someone stay and help me over those first 8 weeks, so I rented a large house on the water with a pool. And I did that because I wanted those who came to help me to have some kind of enjoyable environment. Eventually, family and friends offered to help, and a schedule was made. Basically, people made it a vacation and met my needs while enjoying the amenities. And my late husband's sister was the first to take advantage of the great setup. She stayed a week, and she arrived while I was still in the hospital, and then hustled out as fast as possible and left the day that I was discharged. She didn't even bother to visit me while I was in the hospital because she didn't like the traffic. She effectively did nothing for me, but also enjoyed the beautiful home and the amenities. Prior to the surgery, I let her know that I was leaving $1,000 in the home to be used exclusively for items needed for the house, as well as paper and laundry products and cleaning supplies. And this also included any needs my dog might need, who's also staying in the house when I was discharged. Well, imagine my shock when I discovered that she spent all the money in 6 short days. Hurt and feeling used, I decided to table the issue till I was feeling better. As I was recovering, I was not texting or answering calls, and my phone was off. I needed all of my energy for my literal survival. There was no consideration for what I was going through, and thus no communication for me. Weeks later, her husband made a feeble attempt to admonish me for not texting and calling her to make her feel better, but saying sorry, not sorry was my response to this entitled one. Nearly 3 months later, I was back home and she came to visit, and after a pleasant visit, I asked her what made her think that it was okay to spend all the money I had left for use at the house. She said she had given me receipts for her expenses, and this is true, but she began charging me before she even left home. Body wash, breakfast, chewing gum, and then she stated she used it to stock up the kitchen, and I asked, okay, for who? Since it was bits of leftovers, who was she leaving these for? She had several notes stating that she used her own credit card and no receipts were available, listing food and gas, despite the fact that she has an electric car. Then she stated that I had gifted it to her, but I reminded her of my instructions and I blatantly stated that no, I didn't. Then she stated it was her expense account, and I asked her why she thought she was entitled to an expense account and what made her think that I would provide one. When I originally rented the house, she shared that she had bragged to friends about her wonderful vacation planned at my summer rental. And trust me, I fully realize that this bridge is burned, though I cannot imagine what difference it honestly could have made. So am I the jerk for bringing this up in the first place? What should I do? No, you are not the jerk for bringing this up, because honestly, I would have done the same thing. Who in their right mind would spend over $1,000 on food? And this is in 6 days we're talking about. Like seriously, you could spend like what, $100 and still have plenty of food left over, especially if you know what you're doing and you're making your own stuff. Like your sister-in-law absolutely took advantage of you, and they took advantage of the fact that you were having surgery and that you weren't even at the house at the time. Like this lady's a piece of garbage. She literally spent all of your money in 6 days. Like, are you kidding me right now? And then she has the audacity to turn around and try and make this your fault. It's like, what are you talking about? She tried to make up all this stuff of like, oh, you gave that money to me, it was a gift. Then she tried to claim it for like food and gas, even though she has an electric car. Like this lady is so full of garbage, it's not even funny. So no, you're not the jerk for bringing this up. Your sister-in-law is a garbage human being, and the fact that she did this in some kind of weird attempt to like take advantage of you and gain clout with her friends, in my opinion, says everything you would ever need to know about her. My idiotic managers refuse to hire people to replace those that quit, leaving the rest of us completely understaffed and overwhelmed. And at this point, I really don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So about 2 years ago, I started at a store, and I had two options, either work with meat or the cashier. Now, I chose meat and it was okay, even though I really hated it, but then my supervisor got transferred, and we were down a person, but nobody replaced him, aside from a new supervisor who we knew. Then another coworker kept missing days and got canned, but again, no replacement to be found. So now we're down to 2 people. And at this point, we're stuck with 6 people, 3 that show up from the morning till the early afternoon, and 3 in the afternoon all the way to the evening. So this was a 6-day work week, which I also didn't like, but I needed a job. So we all got 1 day off. So when someone from the afternoon shift, my shift, would take a day off, we get overworked when there's many customers. But anytime we hear about the subject of getting more help, our boss makes it clear that he won't hire anyone. That is, unless he cuts hours. We tell him what's going on, and he has cameras so he knows how many customers we get and how little work we get done versus when we have 3 people, but it all falls on deaf ears. And he also makes boneheaded decisions. Now, for a bit of context, Mondays are an absolute nightmare. Many customers come in, so we really need all hands on deck. So to top it all off, one of us has Monday off. So we're down to 2 people for the busiest day of the week. He will send for help, but only to cover lunch and nothing else. To make matters worse, he does hire people, but only for cashier positions while we need people. Being understaffed not only affects us being overworked, but customers can only be so patient and waiting if there's only one person for 4 or more customers, because then they just straight up leave. However, again, all of this is made very clear, but the boss does nothing but put blame on us if we have low sales. And yes, you heard that right. He, or the store supervisor, tells us that we have low sales and that it's our fault. Honestly, I want to leave, but I don't have another job lined up, and the good in me thinks of my coworkers when I do finally leave. They still deal with his inability to properly run a store. What should I do? Okay, first off, I don't think you should think about your coworkers at all in this scenario, because sure, they're in this mess as well, but they're in it voluntarily just like you are. I understand you need the job, but trust me, this is not worth it. So if I was in your shoes, I would be finding a new job immediately. Like, these managers and supervisors sound like they suck so much. And as someone who's worked a job where literally there's not enough people to get stuff done, like, it seriously is such a nightmare, it's not even funny. You're always stressed out, you can never get anything done that you need to get done, open, and you're always just running at 1,000%. And then for him to turn around and be like, wow, we have low sales, it's your fault. Like, oh my god, no wonder people are quitting. Like, if you're gonna understaff a department and then complain because that department is underperforming, then you, the manager, are the problem, not the employees who are doing everything they can to keep up. So truly, in my opinion, you definitely need to find something else, and you need to do this sooner than later for you as opposed to anybody else. Because trust me, that job does not sound like a good time, and if you know what's good for you, you will try to find something better sooner than later. My awful, useless manager refuses to do his job and literally leaves all of us in a bind constantly and consistently. And after dealing with this for so long, I finally watched this guy get fired in a way that honestly he completely deserved. And I truly hope I never have to deal with him ever again. Here's what happened. So I work at a local restaurant in my town as a waiter, and in May of this year, our previous general manager, we'll call her Cherry for the sake of the story, had resigned due to her pregnancy and other personal life events. So it was about 3 to 4 months before we finally hired a new general manager, who I will call Jackson. Jackson seemed like a nice guy and everything, a little quiet and standoffish at first, which was a contrast from our bubbly and more outgoing manager Cherry, but completely understandable nonetheless, because he was in a whole new environment. Well, little did we all know, those wouldn't be the only contrast from Cherry. When I tell you guys that Jackson was a complete letdown, I really can't stress that enough. Here's some examples of just how he let us all down. For starters, he would constantly show up late or not show up at all for his job without even calling the restaurant. Mind you, this is the same guy who is supposed to hold all of us employees below his authority to the same standard of communicating with your job. And he was also the same guy who scheduled all of our hours. And there were quite a few issues with this first problem. We were often led to wonder what in the world was going on with our general manager when he wouldn't arrive when scheduled. He would also often show up to work much later on in the day, or even the next day with a pitiful excuse if he even had one at all. One day he did not show up at all, and no one could get a hold of this guy by phone. He then showed up the next day and had the audacity to say something along the lines of, well, it doesn't matter why I was gone, it just matters that I'm here right now. And this to me is very reminiscent of the scene from the Brady Bunch movie, where the father always had some motivational quote that really wasn't saying anything at all. Jackson would also leave to go help his girlfriend, who supposedly worked at a shop around the corner from us, and sometimes not even let us know. Once, when this happened, only myself and one cook was there to run the entire restaurant. Luckily, we were not busy at all that day, but it's still the principle of what Jackson did to us. He then came back and nonchalantly said, oh yeah, I just had to help my girlfriend with a few things at her job, but I'm sure there were people at his girlfriend's job who could have helped her, but whatever, I guess. Jackson left before his shift was over with, without notifying any of us before another waitress, who we will call Sarah, even came into work. Sarah happened to be late that day and thankfully called us to let us know. I told her that I would let Jackson know, but I could not find him due to the lack of communication. Sometimes if you're late, you have to use a manager's card to clock in late. So when Sarah arrived, she was about to do this, but because Jackson was gone and none of us could find him, we all finally realized that he wasn't there. She had to call another shift manager by the name of Brenda and wait for her to come and clock her in. She had to wait maybe 2 to 3 hours to clock into her own job. And this guy would never apologize or anything like that for all of this. He would just come back to work whenever he pleased and just act like nothing was out of the ordinary. Another example is the fact that he did not work around other people's schedules when needed. Our last manager, Cherry, was good about working around other people's schedules, especially whenever we needed it. As long as we gave her notice and time, she was okay with it. But Jackson, on the other hand, absolutely did not. We had a big amount of new cooks and hosts that applied and got the job at our restaurant shortly after Jackson stopped in, and while they seemed good and promising, he didn't work around their schedules like he should have. So, if I remember correctly, all but 1 or 2 of our new staff almost quit immediately after joining. He would also order things that the restaurant did not need, while completely neglecting things that we did need. One time, our dishwasher was breaking down during rush hour, which slowed us down considerably. When another one of our shift managers by the name of Kaylin called in and asked for help, he somehow got out of our call where we needed help, stating that he needed more pancake batter when no one ever mentioned anything about that. He also proceeded to hang up on her and did not arrive to help us at all that day. Jackson also does not follow the dress code. For reference, us employees have a dress code to wear all black, but managers can wear whatever they want as long as they look professional. Well, one day, Jackson came in with some sweats and a hoodie on, and when another waitress by the name of Tara called him out for the double standard, he left to go home and never came back for the rest of the day. Also, his last day working there was a complete nightmare. Everything you could think of was going wrong on this morning. We had faulty equipment, as the dishwasher washer and some of the machines were just malfunctioning, and because of all of this, it was unfortunately taking a lot of tables around an hour to receive their food, not to mention that this was also during the rush hour. Eventually, we had to put a hold on the doors and even pause seating for new guests because there was no way any of us could catch up to where we needed to be while still be expected to take on new customers. And to top it all off, Jackson of all people was in charge to manage this crap. Now, Jackson did his usual thing of not doing his job like he should, and he even had the nerve to try and boss other people around without doing much to help any of us. But eventually, he disappeared without notifying anyone. Another waitress, who we will call Abby, as well as myself, needed help with something that only Jackson could have helped us with since he is a manager. So we looked around the restaurant and we simply could not find him. We then went outside into the parking lot to find him, but his car was nowhere to be found. During all of this, we had very upset customers who wanted to speak to the manager, but I had to be honest and tell them that we had no manager here with us because he was out there doing whatever it is that he does. And sure, that was probably unprofessional to say, but he was being very unprofessional, and it was true. We then had to let the other staff know what happened, and Tara had to call Kaylin to notify her. By this point, Jackson had been written up many times for his previous incidents that I had talked about, but he had one last chance and he just now blew it. So Kaylin ended up calling him to fire him, but he decided to quit on the spot so that he couldn't be fired. So Kaylin had to step in to help for the rest of the day, meaning that there was no more Jackson. Jackson was fired over 2 months ago, and since then, Brenda has had to step up as the general manager, which honestly was the best choice, considering that she had worked at our restaurant for almost 20 years and had more experience at other restaurants in the past before that. And now that you know he was fired, here's 2 other things that I need to mention. For starters, he did not keep up with the bills and utilities of the restaurant. We all found this out after he quit, so it was between Kaylin and Brenda to step in and catch up on all of this. We also found out that after he quit, that he was fired from several other jobs as general manager before being hired by us. And I do not know how he managed to get hired at our restaurant, but he did. And this explains why he quit before we would fire him, so that he couldn't say that he was fired again. I also want to emphasize again that Cherry was a really good general manager. I think that she actually cared about her job and the employees, which is a rarity these days. So it was sad to see her leave. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for Jackson at all. So that was the story of our entitled and useless previous general manager, Jackson. Nobody has ever seen him again, and I can only pray for whichever place hires him next. Wow, that guy's a piece of garbage. He literally left all of you out to dry so many times it's not even funny. For me, the worst part about it is the fact that he would not step up and do his job. Like, if this guy really is the general manager and he has responsibilities associated with his employees, then he needs to be there and do his job. It is tremendously unfair for everybody else at this job that has to deal with him not being there. Like, seriously, that is so annoying. Not to mention the fact that he would just leave work whenever he wanted to help out his girlfriend. It's like, I'm sorry, sir, do you have a second job somewhere else? Like, what is going on right now? There's no excuse for this. So honestly, for the sake of you and the people you work with, I'm really glad that you guys don't have to deal with Jackson anymore, because this guy sounded like a nightmare to deal with. My entitled coworker treats me specifically like garbage while still choosing to be friends with all of our other coworkers. And at this point, I'm seriously confused on what I should do about this, because right now I don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So I'm a server at a steakhouse, and one day I took a double shift where I was host for the rest of the half. We had a dinner rush, and since there were 2 other hosts taking care of guests, I decided to help out with the servers and bartenders during the rush. One of the hosts was in training, and the other was very experienced, and given the circumstances, I asked the experienced host if she would be okay taking care of the rush with the trainee. She said, yeah, that's fine, this is nothing. And so I went off to do my thing. I go to the kitchen and I start helping servers with running food and getting bread and anything else they might need. I then start helping the bartender, who was very clearly behind on a lot. For reference, I'll call him Tony. Out of nowhere, Tony starts berating me with a rude tone. What are you doing? We don't need you back here, bro. There's a hostess by herself up there. Now, mind you, there's 2 hosts, and the experienced one said she didn't need my help. Stunned in that moment, I go silent, and I just go up there to check on the host desk. And guess what? They're completely fine. Later on, I confronted Tony, and I told him politely, hey Tony, I appreciate you looking out for other workers, but what you're not going to do is talk to me that way. I've been helping you out all night through the rush, and I just found it disrespectful that you treat me this way. His response was to say, okay bro, alright. And this is all midway while I'm talking to him, just trying to brush me off. He then said to me, you're just trying to start stuff with me. I then tell him politely, no, I'm just telling you how you made me feel. He then just excuses me away like I was annoying him. Now Now, I barely stand up for myself, but I really felt tired of being a pushover. Typically, when someone calls me out, I accept it and read advice that standing up for yourself gets you the respect you deserve most of the time, but I couldn't be the more opposite. Since that encounter, Tony never says hello to me, despite me greeting him every time I walk in. I run his food when he's choked at the bar, and he never says thank you to me. He laughs and converses with anyone else, but despite me never being rude or nasty to him in my entire time working there, he never does that with me. So hopefully you get the picture. I genuinely don't know how to deal with this, and it's compounded by the fact that he's always on the same shift as me. I have OCD and ADHD, so it's hard to stop running this over in my head. So I need to ask, has anyone else had a similar situation like this? How do you mentally go about this? Do I stay the better man and treat him with respect? Or do I just ignore him and stop helping someone who doesn't show gratitude or even acknowledge my existence? What should I do? Honestly, if I was in your shoes, because trust me, I've been there before, I would stop trying to talk to him altogether. I know you probably feel like maybe if you prove yourself, you'll gain his respect, but I'm here to tell you that Tony doesn't care about you. He doesn't like you now, and he's not gonna like you tomorrow. And fortunately for you, there's nothing you can do about that. And I say fortunately because at least you know where Tony stands. You know that he's a piece of garbage, and you do not need to waste your energy on trying to appeal to him. Truly, this is a situation where no matter how hard you try, someone is always gonna hate you for literally no reason. You could be the shiniest apple in the bunch, but guess what? Some people just don't like apples. And that's not a you problem, that most definitely is a Tony problem. So something that I've done when I've dealt with coworkers who act like this is that I just completely cut off any unnecessary communication with them. When they betray my innate trust I might have in them in this way, then I immediately just shut them out and I say, okay, we're just coworkers. I'm not gonna be your friend, and trust me, we are never talking outside of what's necessary. Because Tony's behavior is completely unacceptable, and you do not deserve to deal with that in the slightest. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.